You may not have noticed, but the world is on the verge of an all-out currency war. The U.S. dollar has tumbled 10% in just a few months thanks to the Federal Reserve's easy money policies. Many other currencies have soared in response, prompting moves by Japan, Thailand, and Brazil to keep their own currencies down and help their exporters. And who's pulling the strings? Many experts say it's China. They've been keeping the yuan artificially low for years, undercutting competitors and putting pressure on emerging economies around the world. Can anything be done to reverse that trend and bring the markets back into balance? This week on Money and Markets, we'll ask currency experts Brian Rich and Chuck Butler that very question. Plus, Tony Sagami and Rudy Martin will examine two global hotspots that have seen dramatic shifts in their economies for better and worse. And Jen Amos will give us ideas for playing the currency markets based on the picks and pans of all the Weiss research editors. All that and a closing comment from Martin Weiss coming up right now.
From our studios in Jupiter, Florida, Weiss Money Network presents Money and Markets. And now, Jamie Holmes.
Hello, everyone. Our first guest this week is Brian Rich, a currency specialist for Weiss Research and the editor of the World Currency Alert newsletter. He has been following the currency wars very closely. He joins us now via Skype from North Florida with his thoughts. Hello, Brian. Always good to see you.
Hey, Jamie. Good to see you.
All right, Brian. First of all, why do you think that we're seeing this trend of competitive currency devaluations?
Right. Well, we're certainly in a fertile environment for it. We're coming out of a major financial crisis. We've got sovereign debt problems around the world. Countries are recovering at different speeds. The emerging countries of the world are doing better, and they're getting a lot of global capital as a result. That's pushing their currencies higher. They're concerned about their ability to export, and the strength of their currency is a huge threat to that. So they're intervening in the currency markets, and they're erecting some capital controls to sort of curtail some of the hot money coming into their country.
Brian, as you know, the finance ministers of the G20 nations, they met in Seoul, South Korea last weekend. What was your take from that meeting?
Well, they pretty much said a lot of the same things they've been saying. I think it's interesting to note that they said that they were meeting with a sense of urgency. And I think that they're very well aware of what these competitive currency devaluations we've seen in recent months could turn into. It could grow into a broader wave of protectionism, which could be a major threat to the global economy. So they met in effort to try to sort of turn the tide on that. The public statement didn't say a whole lot, but I think what's more important is what was discussed behind doors. And I think we may see some of that manifested in the markets over the next coming weeks, so something to pay close attention to.
You know, in this situation, all arrows seem to point to one place, and that's China. How do its actions affect the rest of the currency markets?
Right. This is really all about China. You know, a lot of people, the media has made the next round of QE out of the United States has made it a huge dollar issue. But the reason these emerging countries are stepping in and taking it, acting on their own behalves to try to weaken their currencies is because of the growing gap between the way their currencies are performing relative to China's currency, who continues to manage their currency very closely to the dollar. So what it's doing is it's creating a greater disadvantage in global trade for these currencies that are appreciating. So China's currency policy has a huge, huge role in this. And I think that's, in reading between the lines of the G20, that's what they're speaking to. How can we get this China issue solved? And it's proven to be a very, very difficult one.
Okay, well, this is the big question, I suppose. Are there any solutions to a problem out there like China?
Well, if they could somehow miraculously convince China to revalue the yuan, maybe a one-off revaluation, it would certainly go a long way to reunifying the world and managing what's looking like a divided world now, which is very scary for the global economy. I don't think that's going to happen. History shows us that it's not going to happen. China has been very resistant to make meaningful concessions on their currency policy. I think what we could see in the markets in coming weeks is perhaps a coordinated intervention to weaken the yen by the major economies of the world. This would in fact go a long way to solving a lot of the imminent problems that we have now. It would weaken Asian currencies, it would weaken the yen, obviously, all of these key trade competitors to China, and narrow that gap and sort of soften the sense of fear surrounding competitive currency devaluations and protectionism.
All right, stick around, Brian. We want to bring you back a little bit later in the show to get your outlook for the dollar and the rest of the currency markets going forward. Thanks again.
Great, thank you.
Let's turn to Asia, where, as we heard from Brian, many currency investors are now focusing their attention. Joining us from his home in Montana is Tony Sagami, Asia specialist for Weiss Research and the editor of the Asia Stock Alert. Hello, Tony.
Hello. You can see I'm in Montana, but I'm going to be in Asia in another 2 weeks.
Well, I like the home. It looks nice.
Thank you.
All right, let's start with China, Tony, which has been keeping its currency artificially low. Do you think the yuan will be forced to appreciate?
Oh, I don't think there's any question, and it's really not a matter of being forced. I think the Chinese government would like the yuan to appreciate, but at a very slow and measured pace on their terms. And they don't care what the rest of the world thinks, or even Obama and Geithner. They want that gradual appreciation to move from a manufacturing to consumption-based economy like the U.S. And at the same time, they'd like that yuan to appreciate so they can start to buy their strategic assets like oil and copper and gold.
One of the most dramatic recent moves in the currency markets recently was Japan's direct intervention to devalue the yen. Why hasn't that worked, and what do you see ahead for the Japanese currency?
Well, it's not just Japan. All the countries around the world have to learn that government intervention just doesn't work long term. Those free market forces are what will determine what happens. And so Japan's effort was a failure, and it will be again. However, I think you'll see the yuan continue to appreciate, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it at 75. But I would also point out that it's not so much that the Japanese economy is so strong, but it's that the U.S. dollar is so weak.
We also saw Thailand's attempt to devalue its currency. Do you think that other Asian countries are going to follow a similar suit here?
Well, I was pretty impressed. That was a very innovative way to put brakes on the capital inflows. Brazil did the same thing, and it's a pretty effective way to slow down that hot money. But the underlying reason their economies and their currencies are so strong is because they have strong balance of trade balances, strong economies, reasonable and intelligent government spending. Those are the reasons their currencies appreciate, and no matter what they do, it's not going to stop it long term.
Tony, which Asian countries do you think are going to shake out to be the winners and the losers in the currency wars?
Oh, I think the winners are pretty obvious. China, naturally, we've talked about them quite a bit, but also Singapore. That's another economy that has a very strong trade surplus and also a budget surplus, very strong economy. The biggest losers, I think, like that TV show, The Biggest Losers, Japan, number one, because they are going to see their yen appreciate, and that hurts their exports. But also the U.S. will be the biggest loser of all.
Okay. Tony Sagami, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Another part of the world enjoying major growth in its economies and currencies is Latin America. And joining us to examine those markets is Rudy Martin, an emerging market specialist for Weiss Research. Rudy, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Rudy, why is Latin America so hot right now?
Well, you know, all you have to do is follow the money. Back in 2008, there was over $100 billion going into places like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Peru. And when we had a disruption in the financial markets in 2009, that foreign direct investment is back on track for 2010 and going forward. You're also seeing a surge in the stock markets as well. But, you know, fundamentally what's going on, these are investment grade countries now. And there's a lot of interest, not just in the equity market, but also in the debt market as well. And that's actually a pretty large part of this as well.
One country that's seen a lot of hot money pour into it, of course, has been Brazil. In fact, they've tried to raise taxes on foreign investment, trying to limit those gains that they've been seeing in their currency. Is that a tactic that's actually going to work? Well,
that's really a two-part question. Number one is, do controls work? And number two, will they work in Brazil longer term? On the first one is a definite possible, you know, in closed economies like the communist and small countries, these controls have an effect of reducing the attractiveness of markets. But in a place like Brazil that, as I said, has so much going on from not just a direct investment, but the materials, the economy, so many other positive things, and the fact that they've got these huge reserves, not just the oil reserves, but also the gold reserves. All this is very attractive to investors. So longer term, it's not really going to keep the money out of Brazil.
Any other dramatic stories coming out of Latin America in regards to the currency?
Brazil is obviously everyone's first choice for Latin America, or should be everyone's first choice for Latin American markets. But I find there's also a very interesting thing going on in Argentina. There's a lot of foreign direct investment going in there as a result of the recent soybean deal with China. Chinese are not coming in and spending tens of billions of dollars to improve the railroads, so there'll be more economic activity from there. The government is on the verge of issuing new debt. There's more interest in the stock market there, and while it's a small market, you're seeing the movement already in the equities there.
All right, give me some specifics here, Rudy. How should investors play Latin America?
Well, definitely, I think as it relates to, and I'm saying Argentine equities right now present a really uncommonly good value. And I've got two picks there that I really like. One is Cressy that I've talked about before. Cresud is the name of the company, really, and ticker symbol CRESY. They're an agricultural company. They also have real estate, great value, and they're also building that model in Brazil. And the second one, which is really a dynamic company, Mercado Libre, it's the Latin eBay, ticker symbol MELI. And if you like the fact that internet companies are posting high numbers in terms of growth, Latin America represents the biggest market longer term for new users for internet. It's undersaturated, and with the growth that you're seeing in the population, that's a really great concept. Mercado Libre and Cressy are my two equities in Argentina that I would definitely look at.
Okay, Rudy Martin, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, when we come back, Jen Amos will be here with even more picks for playing the currency markets. And later, we're going to bring back Brian Rich with his forecast for currencies, along with Chuck Butler, the president of Everbank World Markets. As always, if you have a question or a comment, please email us at weissmoneynetwork@weissinc.com. We may not be able to respond to all of your emails or address them on air, but we're keeping them all on hand for future episodes, and we appreciate the feedback. Money and Markets will be back in just a moment.